We welcome you into the best podcast available 2 weeks away from the 2021 NFL Draft here in the CLE. I'm Jason Gibbs alongside Andrew Gribble, and we've got quite a show for you today. Matt Miller from ESPN, NFL Draft Analyst, will join the program. In addition, Browns safety Grant Delpit will join the program to talk about his draft experience, the offseason, looking ahead here to the 2021 season, and talking about a new addition to the Cleveland Browns in the form of defensive edge rusher Jadeveon Clowney. Gribbs, the Browns getting it done. The front office getting it done. Andrew Berry, in his part of the press release, said that Jadeveon Clowney was relentless. And it was Jadeveon Clowney that was saying Andrew Berry was the one that was relentless when it came to pursuing the defensive end. Berry gets his guy on a 1-year deal. Jadeveon Clowney is a Cleveland Brown.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think this is a long courtship that has finally ended with Clowney with the Browns. I think it was well documented last year. The Browns were interested in Jadeveon Clowney, and he ultimately went to the Titans. Had a solid year up to the point where he was, and then had to hit a knee injury creep up and ended his season about halfway through it. So I think he's healthy now. He's ready to prove himself. And I think with what the Browns have going on their defensive line with Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, Tack McKinley, Porter Gustin, and some others, I mean, you've got what now looks like a full defensive end room. And I think now you enter the draft in 2 weeks pretty much open. I still think we think it's going to be a defensive player. I think I've lowered my percentages just a little bit though now. I think I've gone from 99% to maybe like a 93% prediction on defensive players, but that's what you do in free agency. You cover up your areas of weakness, so you're drafting in a position of strength and getting a true solid player at number 26 or later in the draft or earlier in the draft if you make some moves up or down, depending on what suits you best.
Yeah, all options are on the table, I would think, now for that Thursday night pick at pick number 26. What's more fascinating will be what happens on day 2, I think now. This team has the flexibility. We've talked about the fact we don't anticipate them using all of their draft picks, and this could be a situation where the Browns could definitely be in play to move up. Maybe, if a guy falls and it's within that 10-spot radius of the Browns, maybe they move up and they go get a guy. Maybe they move back. Maybe they even move back on Thursday night. I don't know if that necessarily happens. I think they're content to let the best player available fall to them. But now it opens up what could be a very interesting Friday night for this football team.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of the focus, understandably now, is what would make the Browns better in 2021 to go win a Super Bowl. But at the same time, the long-term vision of your franchise is building it through the draft and getting players on these 4 to 5 year deals outside the draft and building that way. I mean, the reason why the Browns are in this position, outside of the hire of Kevin Stefanski and everything else like that, your core of this team, Baker Mayfield, Nick Chubb, Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett, those are all draft picks. Those are guys that have been here on rookie deals and have allowed you to fill out the roster around them to maximize the talent you have. So now you're looking, these picks are not just about 2021. You're planting the seeds for this to be not just a 1-year thing with the Browns winning. I mean, this is about long-term winning. And so that's why I still think defense is where you go, because I think you need some more long-term solutions on the defense, because you've got a lot of these guys, Clowney included, on 1-year deals. But it just opens it up where I still think you're going to find a few new offensive players on the team via the draft, and it could be on day 1 and day 2. I just think it's more open because, as Nathan likes to say, you can roll this team out there right now and feel good about it. Now you're just adding to this team via the draft, via 9 picks. Whether or not you make all 9, we'll see. But these are truly now picks about the future. This isn't just about 2021 with this draft. And with Clowney signing, that becomes even more abundantly clear.
All right, let's talk about Jadeveon Clowney. Your biggest takeaway from his introductory press conference held on Wednesday.
Well, I think the most memorable answer is going to be what he said about what's changed about the Browns in the last year. And I think the easy answer is they're a winning team now. I mean, and it's a completely understandable thing. I mean, he went to the Titans last year, who were coming off that great run to the AFC Championship, upsetting the Ravens in the playoffs. He was joining a team that he thought was one step away from the Super Bowl. The Browns in 2019 didn't look like that team. They were 6-10, had a lot of questions, had a new head coach. I mean, you understand what his thought process was. This is a different situation he's walking into. I also think it's a different playing situation he's walking into. I think when you looked at it last year, was he going to be an every down guy on the other side of Myles Garrett? Now you look at it more of as you can maximize his talents by maybe lessening his snap count and putting him in situations to really wreak havoc alongside Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson, Tack McKinley, all those guys. And so I think the situation, the winning, everything like that stood out with the way he reacted to that question. He just said simply, they're winning now. And that just, that made all the difference for him.
I think the other thing that I took away, he said, they wanted me. They showed me how much they wanted me, and they have an idea of how they want to use me. And he clearly liked that, and that appealed to him, whatever that philosophy might be that Joe Woods and Kevin Stefanski have pitched to him. He really liked it because he's a Cleveland Brown here today.
Well, I think a very underrated thing about Clowney, and I think almost an underrated thing about the Browns defense last year, was the Browns were a lot better against the run last year than they've been in most years. And stopping the run is something Clowney is very good at. And I think that plays into the strengths of this defense, where just because he's known as a big time pass rusher, this guy makes your run defense better. And I think that run defense last year, I think, held the Browns together defensively and made them better than they might have been had they not been good at the run. I mean, that was the one thing they did pretty well. And you want to keep doing those things well while getting better at the things you didn't do so well. And I think the upgrades in the secondary, adding maybe some more speed at linebacker, I think that makes you better stopping the pass. But I think now you're able to maintain how solid you were against the run last year. And that's very important, especially in the division the Browns are in right now.
We will hear from Grant Delpit on the newest member of the Cleveland Browns, Jadeveon Clowney, coming up in a couple minutes. Right now, though, what the Browns may or may not do at pick number 26. ESPN draft analyst Matt Miller had a chance to sit down with Gribbs. Gribbs knocked out everything this week.
Running the show this week, Gibbs.
It was a Gribbs podcast, basically. I'm here for about 6 minutes of it. Gribbs took care of the rest. He did all the heavy lifting. A great interview with Matt Miller, though, and some great insight on some of the guys in this draft and who may or may not be there at pick number 26. Have a watch and have a listen.
All right, we're glad to be joined now by Matt Miller, ESPN draft analyst. You can follow all his work at NFL Draft Scout, and you'll be seeing him on your TV a lot in these coming weeks and during the NFL draft. And Matt, I'm just wondering what your perspective of the Browns is entering this 2021 draft and how different it is to look at them from the bottom of the first round instead of the top.
Yeah, Andrew, it's very different this year to be drafting at number 26 overall and not having traded back to that point. I think that's what's really exciting right now. And one thing that, and I'm sure we'll get into this, one thing that's really interesting this year is that the Cleveland Browns don't have a lot of desperate needs. Normally we would see the Browns headed into a draft and say, okay, you got to get a quarterback, got to get an offensive tackle. There really aren't that many needs this year. There aren't that many holes, which speaks to the job that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have done. So I think, Browns fans have always been dedicated and loyal. I've loved, over the last decade of covering the draft, interacting with Browns fans because they know their stuff. They're passionate about their team. So it's exciting to see a winning program there now that y'all get to enjoy this a little bit.
Just looking back real quick at last year, what did you learn about Andrew Berry and his drafting style with the Browns, and how does that weigh into how you look at how they see the field this year?
Yeah, last year is tough to put too much stock into because of, all the changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic really starting, in March. We saw a lot of processes change. But I think one thing that we can learn about Andrew is that they're going to take everything into account. This is not a strictly analytics-based front office. This is not a strictly tape-based front office. And I thought they did a great job of playing the board smartly last year, not panicking. When you start to see a couple offensive tackles come off the board, not panicking, waiting, and getting a player who I had as the top tackle in last year's draft. So I think they did a really good job of that. I'm anxious to see if that carries forward this year. Will they remain patient and let the board fall to them, or do we see them maybe get a little bit more aggressive? I think that's somewhere we can start to figure out what the signature is of the general manager. Are you conservative? Are you aggressive? How do you value future draft picks? I haven't seen the Browns give up much draft capital yet. So I think that's something that we'll all be trying to figure out with this year's draft.
Now, I know a lot of what you're probably talking about on TV these days is about offensive players, quarterbacks, the wide receivers,
Yes.
offensive tackles at the beginning of the draft. But is this a good draft to need defense the way it appears the Browns will be headed this year?
It is where the Browns are drafting. And I think that's the key. I only have one player ranked in my top 10 who is on the defensive side of the ball. That's Micah Parsons from Penn State. So where the draft, as you mentioned, it's so offensive heavy. We're going to see 5 quarterbacks drafted fairly early. We're going to see 4 pass catchers drafted early, 2 offensive tackles drafted early. The Browns will not be at least addressing those positions early. So that is good news because more valuable defensive players are going to get pushed down a little bit. So I think this year with the depth at edge rusher, while there's not that one elite prospect, the depth is good. The depth at corner and safety are really good. The depth, at the linebacker position there. And this is a year where we actually have a lot of really good coverage linebackers. So the depth on defense is very impressive this year, even if there's not those outstanding players like Jeff Okudah going number 3 overall last year. We're not going to see that this year, but that is good news for the Browns because the end of round 1 to end of round 2, you're getting a lot of quality starters on that side of the ball.
This may be more of a philosophical question, but what makes someone a late first round pass rusher? Because we know there's so much so much stock put in the pass rusher position. You just don't usually see this many guys pegged as late first round.
I think what's different this year is we have some players who lack production or experience. Gregory Rousseau had 1 year at Miami and he had 19 and a half tackles for a loss and 15 and a half sacks, but it's hard to figure out how much of that production was due to the scheme, how much of that production was due to him, because we didn't get to see a follow-up. Jalen Phillips from Miami takes his place and was fantastic, and he checks a lot of the boxes, but he has injury concerns in history with concussions while he was at UCLA. Jason Owe from Penn State is running a 4.3, but he didn't have any sacks last year. So with all these edge rushers, there's things that you get really excited about, but there might be 1 to 2 traits that they're deficient in, whether it's experience, production, whatever it might be. And so I think that's why we're seeing more mid to late round 1 grades on the pass rushers instead of the Chase Young, Nick Bosa. Oh my God, you have to go get this guy early. Even Montez Sweat, who went to the Carolina Panthers, he would be the top pass rusher in this class. And so I think that's where we're seeing players who have a lot of potential, but there's 1 to 2 things that might be missing. And that's why they are being pushed down the board.
Of those guys in the late first round situation, which one of them for you was an easy evaluation and which one has maybe been the toughest one for you?
Oh my gosh. I think the easiest evaluation is probably Kwity Paye from Michigan, just because we've been able to see him do it for a little bit longer. And he's done it with speed and power. It's not just a pure edge rusher. It's not just a pure power rusher. He's been asked to move all around the Michigan defensive line, do a couple different things. So I think that's the easiest evaluation, but also he has the athleticism. So it's not just production. He has burst, he's twitchy, very agile, and he has good strength throughout his body. So I think he's the quote unquote easiest. I think the hardest would be Jason Owe, because you're trying to figure out, here's a player who has elite of elite physical traits. Like he's better than what you would design in a lab to be a pass rusher. But you have to reconcile that with the fact that he didn't have a sack in 2020. Now he had a 4.5 in 2019, I believe, and he's had production in the past. He's had a lot of pressures, but not getting home last year. That's something that you do worry about and try to figure out, okay, like what is this? Because we can only get so far breaking down a scheme without knowing assignments, right? And so that does make it tough of, can this player produce at the NFL level when he didn't in college? So that is the big question mark with him.
Now, another position that has a lot of focus with the Browns is the cornerback spot. It seems like this has been a very good period for the cornerbacks. You hear about all these great pro days these guys are having. Which one of these guys could realistically be in the mix at 26, and which ones would the Browns maybe have to make a move up for?
Yeah, I think to make a move up, there's 3 names. That's Patrick Surtain, the second from Alabama, J.C. Horn from South Carolina, and then Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech, who just went through the combine medical check. That's very, very important for where his stock is at. So those 3 are likely to be off the board. I think the conversation then starts with players like Greg Newsome, the second from Northwestern. You probably look at someone who's physical, plays the ball very well. He's aggressive. On the other side of that would be someone a little bit smaller with really good instincts, Asante Samuel Jr. from Florida State. So the corner class, there is good depth. We could see 5 to 6 drafted in the first round. It wouldn't be a surprise. But then when you come around into round 2, there's still good players there. Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes, both from Georgia, really good players. There's Aaron Robinson from Central Florida, who will likely be a top 50 pick and is a very good player. So it's a good year to have a need at corner, because that depth does stretch into the second round.
So is it fair to say if you don't get one in the first round, you're still in pretty good shape in the second?
I definitely think so.
And does that differ from maybe the pass rushers?
Yeah, so I think that's a great way to look at this. And that's something I try to educate my readers and viewers on is there's not just one round in the draft. There are 7. So you want to try to come out of this with the best combination of players at multiple positions. So when you look at the depth of the corner position, it is a little bit better in round 2 than the edge rusher class is. The edge rushers are most likely going to come off the board in the top 50, the players who have high starting traits. So you look at that, I think at 26, if there's an edge rusher there that you like, or a defensive lineman, that's probably the better value at 26. And then coming around in round 2, there will be corners who can play. And we see it every year. Players dropped around 3, round 4 at corner, and you just draft an athlete. You draft somebody who can run, somebody who's physical, and you incorporate them into your scheme based on your scouting, and they can end up being good starters. So I think with corners, it's not as much of a position where you have to stress out about, we have to draft a guy in the first round. We have to get those premium traits, because you can find speed and length later in the draft.
It gets pretty polarizing with Browns fans when you talk about linebackers in the first round. There's a lot of opinions on these guys, whether you take one in the first round or not. I mean, do you see some players that might be worthy of that spot? And how does that mesh with maybe what the analytics models say about taking linebackers early?
Right. It is tough, but linebacker is also one of the most successful positions drafted in the first round in terms of hit rate. Guys who become Pro Bowlers, get that second contract. So it's a more valuable position when you look at it that way. Or if you just watch the Super Bowl, it was a pretty valuable position, right? So I think that is, maybe the tide does turn there a little bit of, if you can find, and I think this is an important part of it, if you can find the right linebacker, if you can find someone who can stay on the field all 3 downs, if you can find a Devin White, okay, that's very valuable. So I think this year, there are very valuable linebackers who will be available at 26. You can hope that someone like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame slips down the board a little bit because he's a little undersized, but he's excellent in terms of coverage, and he can play in all 3 phases of the game defensively. If it's not a round 1 need, in round 2, you're probably looking at someone like a Jabril Cox from LSU, who is, in my opinion, the best pure coverage linebacker in the draft. Nick Bolton from Missouri, Chaz Surratt from North Carolina. So there is, again, in round 2, you're getting pretty good depth of the linebacker position. I think there's probably a drop off after that point, though, to where you're looking at players who are not likely to be 3 down assets once you get to round 3 and later.
Now, I think in my last few months, I've found one mock draft that had the Browns taking an offensive player, and that was a wide receiver. Now, we don't think that might happen now in the first round, but is there a sweet spot with wide receivers in this draft where you could really maybe get someone that's maybe more talented than where you're picking them at?
I think the beauty of the wide receiver position right now is that every round there's that sweet spot, because there are just so many. The amount of work I do on wide receivers has doubled in the past couple of years. It used to be you try to get about 35 of those guys evaluated, because that was the average. It's about 35 players drafted. Now I'm getting into the 50s, 60s. There's so many wide receivers out there. So I do think that that's an area where really in every round, you're probably going to have value. And the key will be medical's number 1, but then is there a run? If 6 receivers are drafted in the first round, well, then round 2 might actually be a little bit undersaturated compared to what the big board says it would be, right? So, but anytime you get into rounds 4 through 7 at the wide receiver position, a lot like corner, one thing you can kind of bet on that seems to work well is to draft athletes. Draft the guys who are running 4.3s. Draft the players who have elite size. Find a player with an elite trait, draft them and hope to develop them, as opposed to, well, like this guy had good production, but he was slow. I would flip that around and take the player, maybe take the athlete over the great producer in college. So I do think day 3, you can find a lot of steals at wide receiver, especially with Cleveland. You're not looking for a wide receiver 1. You're looking for someone to fill a role, help on special teams. And that's where I think you can clean up a little bit in this draft.
Now, Matt, I know it's tough to predict the future, but I'm wondering, have you heard from teams on how they're valuing picks this year in the draft? Say the Browns have 9 picks in this year's draft, but it's been a weird year to evaluate players. I mean, do you get the indication that people will be trying to stockpile future picks, or are their teams looking to make a lot of picks in this year's draft?
It's interesting, Andrew, because you hear both. You hear the teams that say scouting was hard this year. We didn't get access to players. You only did medicals on 125 guys, which is a really low number. So let's maybe move some of those picks to next year. The other thing that you hear from some really proactive teams is that next year's draft class does not look as good as this year. So it is a little bit of a double-edged sword. We will know more about the players next year, but it looks like there will be a little bit of a drop off in talent. There aren't the household names returning. There's not a Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence returning. There's not, even Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase, Najee Harris. There were so many players who we knew as underclassmen or as returning upperclassmen would be great prospects this year. Next year, there seems to be a little bit of a drop off. So I think that is an interesting part of this, is that we might see teams you'd rather move those picks to a year where you know a lot more about the players, but you have to be aware of the talent drop off from this year to next year.
And I'll just end on this one. This is a spot in the draft the Browns hope to be for a long time. What is, in your opinion, the hallmark of a team that wants to consistently be a winner? What do they usually do with these late first-round picks?
Well, you can look right within your own division and look at the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers, and what they've done very well is hit in the middle rounds. It's not just you need to hit on your first-round pick, right? But it's about finding starters in rounds 2, 3, 4. Pittsburgh seemingly has not missed at the wide receiver position, maybe ever. Baltimore has done a great job of packaging years where they have a lot of picks, years where they don't have many picks, but they're still finding starters in rounds 3, 4, 5. So I think for Andrew Berry, for Kevin Stefanski, moving this thing forward, that's where you have to be. You have to continue to backfill your roster. It's too expensive to keep veterans, right? You have to always have that next guy waiting in the wings, whether it's due to injury, due to salary cap situations. So I think that's where, if you're going to remain picking in the late 20s, you have to hit the mid rounds.
All right, Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst. Follow him at NFL Draft Scout, and you'll be catching him with ESPN and ABC's NFL draft coverage through April 29th through May 1st. Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, you bet, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we're joined now by Brown safety Grant Delpit. And Grant, I just saw your tweet reaction to the news, and I got to ask you, what you're thinking about getting Jadeveon Clowney on this roster?
I was just looking at that picture. I just thought to myself, man, it's about to get scary. It's about to get real scary. Hopefully we can all put it all together as a whole defense. So I think the pieces are there, man. We just got to put it together now. So.
Now, I'm sure you grew up watching SEC football. I mean, what does it mean to be on the same team as a guy like Clowney, a guy like Myles Garrett?
It's crazy. I remember exactly where I was at when that hit happened in South Carolina. I remember exactly where I was at. That's how I know that, we got a great player. And I was actually in Colorado on a ski trip with my family. And I knew that play happened. So, but man, it's gonna be great for us to get another edge rusher. Of course, like I said, we have all the pieces and a great player in the SEC history like he has. So, best conference in college football, you ask me.
Grant, let's talk a little bit about you. You're a few months removed now from the injury. What's the latest on how you're feeling and how you've gotten to this point?
Yeah, I haven't really done any interviews since I've been hurt. I've been really trying to focus on myself and focus on getting back. That's what I've been doing. So I'm almost done. Almost feel like myself again. In like a month or two, and I'll be, 100%. So it's been a long journey. It's been a long time coming. So just hopefully turn around this year and ready to get back to it.
Well, what was maybe the toughest part of this whole period of time for you?
The toughest part, just knowing that, you work your whole life to get somewhere, and then anything can happen and off the wall, and you're forced to sit back and watch. So that's the toughest part, but it's life, it happens.
Grant, when you're going through this rehab process, was there like a turning point moment where you saw some real progress and it kind of propelled your momentum here going forward in the rehab?
I mean, to be honest, not really myself, just because I've been dealing with it for so long. But, my PTs and the people I've been working with say it's definitely turned around fast. And I don't remember a particular time because it's been so long, but it's definitely turned around, to say the least.
How close have you gotten with a guy like Greedy during this time who's been dealing with a similar thing and trying to get back to full strength for 2021?
I've always been close to Greedy. So just the opportunity for us to, I guess, talk about things and get even closer. It's been good. It sucks being able to have to sit out and go to rehab every day while our teammates at practice and not being involved in a lot of stuff. So it's good to go with somebody that I already knew, but it's the last time, this hopefully. So we try to get on the field together.
And then just how much excitement did you get from watching what this Browns team became this past year, and how much did that drive you to get back for this season?
Yeah, it's great. It sucked. You have to sit out of it and just watch from a distance, but I got all the confidence in the world that we can continue that and even get better. We're just scratching the surface of where we need to be at. And hopefully we keep building and keep adding more pieces. We can keep going for a long time.
What have you thought so far about what Ronnie Harrison brought to the table as a player, and then now with the signing of John Johnson, how you guys can kind of work together as safeties in the back end of this defense?
Oh, two ballers, two playmakers. Ronnie, we got Red, me, we got Moffitt, and John. So hopefully, like I said, depth is great, and we always want to have depth in everybody that can play. Vets. We got vets in John. We got Ronnie. Like I said, we got all the pieces, man. We just got time to put it together now, and hopefully we can make it work.
And from what you know about this Joe Woods defense, I mean, how much can it thrive with that kind of depth at the safety position?
Yeah, I don't know what coach got up his sleeve, but we'll find out pretty soon when we report. So we'll see, man. I don't call the shots. I just go with the flow and go with the motion. So we'll see, man. I don't know yet.
We're getting near the start of the 2021 draft here. So it's been about 1 year since you went through your whole process. When you look back on that, what stands out the most to you when you look back on your draft process?
What stands out to me about my draft process, I would just say, just speaking to the guys about to get drafted, just the stress. Just don't let it fold you. Actually, just tweeted something like that. Just don't let it fold you, man. Just let everything work out how it's supposed to work out. You can do all you can do, work out, train every day. But, you're going to get drafted where you get drafted, and it's going to work out in the end. So, it's just a lot of stress and stuff like that going on in that process, but it's all it works out. It's God's plan.
Was that the most stressful part of your career, or any,
Yeah, especially the days leading up. Yeah, especially the days leading up to the draft. My cousin going through it right now. He's Lorenzo Neal. He plays for Purdue, so it's definitely real. But at the end, it's a great feeling. So that's all that matters.
You jealous of him that he didn't have to go through a real combine?
I mean, nah, not really. I mean, I didn't go through a real combine. Really, I didn't really do anything at the combine, but interviews and medical. So, it was a cool experience, man. And I would have wished I would have did some more stuff. So.
And then just looking ahead, what do your next couple months look like in getting yourself ready for training camp? How many hours do you think you're logging in this weight room to get ready and get excited for training camp?
I didn't put so many hours in the weight room, man. But that's just part of life when you play in the league. So especially when you're hurt. I don't know how many hours I put in, but I'm gonna continue to do that and do everything I can to get on the field. It's time. It's been a long time coming. Hopefully I can get the fans what they want, get myself what I want, get my family what I want. So, hopefully we'll see, bro.
And during all this kind of weird times, I mean, what would it feel like to be in kind of a full Cleveland Browns stadium in the fall after the year the whole world's gone through and what you've gone through personally here?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the experience will be like, but I'm sure it's going to be great. I know the fans are waiting for it and players are waiting for it. So we'll see, man. I'm definitely looking forward to it. August or September can't come fast enough. But until then, we wait back, train and work out, practice, and get ready. So that's all we can do.
Cool. Well, Grant, thank you so much, and appreciate you joining us. And Browns fans, make sure to check out all of the episodes of the best podcast available. Log on to clevelandbrowns.com or wherever you get your podcast. Like and subscribe today. You can also watch all of our episodes online at youtube.com/Browns. Thanks to Browns safety Grant Delpit for joining us. Thanks to Matt Miller from ESPN for stopping by. Thanks to Jeff McDaniel for all of his hard work. For Jason Gibbs, I'm Andrew Gribble. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening to the best podcast available.